There is only one way to form limestone. It is made from the tiny bones and shells of sea creatures. They die and sink to the sea floor, where the weight of further layers on top of them crushes them slowly into solid rock. And Praise has discovered other startling evidence that Death Valley had a watery past.
Fossils are a major clue. They are vital in the type of evidence that a geologist will use. And these are some very nice examples of the type of phosphate you can find in these ancient rocks. And you can see here these curving surfaces outlining what looks to be large cabbages displaced in half. These were algae, known as stromatolites.
Ironically, these marine fossils have survived in the Death Valley Desert only because there is so little water that might otherwise have washed them away. But they would have originally looked like this when they flourished in the Death Valley waters as the limestone formed more than 1 billion years ago.
These tell us that the environment in this rock form would have been a shallow sea. I've been here when these rocks were first being formed. I'd be sitting in my swimming trunks about waist deep in water, very much like the Bahamas today.
The stromatolites are some of the earliest signs of life on our planet. To discover what happened over the next 1 billion years, Praise studied evidence in the surrounding hills.
The different bands of colors, the rock layers, and the hills represent entities that cover the Death Valley area. You deposit a layer of limestone, move back across the land, another layer of limestone will be deposited,
So we have a history of repeating, moving across the Death Valley region from the time of the Mad Lights to these rock layers now, more than a million years later. Geologists wanted to figure out what dramatic geological upheaval could have turned Death Valley from a shallow sea to the baking hot desert of today. And Craves has found clues in a rock that is entirely different from the marine limestone he has studied up until now.
This is a nice example of a rock type called granite. And it forms the veins that are on the hillside behind me. You can think of these like the fingers of my hand. They're fed upward from a much more larger, massive area of granite sitting underneath.
The granite tells scientists the reasons why Death Valley's ancient kings vanished.
For adults with type 2 diabetes, do you know about Mounjaro? With Mounjaro, 3 out of 4 people reach an A1C of less than 7%. Plus, you can loss up to 25 pounds. Don't take Mounjaro if you're allergic to it, or if you or someone in your family had medullary thyroid cancer or multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2. Stop and call your doctor right away if you have an allergic reaction, a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or vision changes. Serious side effects may include inflamed pancreas and gallbladder problems. Taking Mounjaro with a sulfonylurea insulin may cause low blood sugar. Tell your doctor if you're nursing, pregnant, plan to be, or taking birth control pills, and before scheduled procedures with anesthesia. Side effects include nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting, which can cause dehydration and may cause kidney problems. Get to know Mounjaro at Mounjaro.com. Ask your doctor about once-weekly Mounjaro.
Never, ever sue the driver who crashed into you after a car accident. There's a better way to get compensated that's faster, easier, and could get you way more money without spending years in court or paying expensive lawyers up front. If you've been in a car accident in the past year, even if you were just a passenger, what I'm about to share could save you months of hassle and put tens or even hundreds of thousands more in your pocket. Here's what most people do. They either accept whatever small check insurance sends them, or they hire a lawyer up front and prepare for a long, expensive legal battle. Both options leave you frustrated and underpaid. But some accident victims are discovering a completely different approach, one that could get them 6 or 7 figure settlements without ever suing anyone or stepping into a courtroom. It's called the 2025 Crash Connect Compensation Program, and it was created specifically to help accident victims get maximum compensation without the nightmare of lawsuits, upfront legal fees, or insurance company runarounds. They're currently looking for 10 more car accident victims to try the program at no cost and receive their full compensation quickly. Check in seconds if you qualify for the program by clicking the link around this video and find out if you could be owed a bigger check. Take Derek's experience. Everyone told him suing was his only option to get real money. His lawyer quoted him $8,000 up front and warned the case would take at least a year, maybe longer. Derek decided to check if he qualified for the Crash Connect program first. He received $130,000 in 42 days without suing anyone or paying legal fees up front. Here's how it works. Click the link on this video to access the qualifications list. You'll answer 4 basic multiple-choice questions about what happened, no legal terminology, nothing complicated. It takes roughly 30 seconds and checking is 100% free. Once you qualify, an accident specialist contacts you directly. You walk them through your accident details, then they take over completely. No lawsuit, no court appearances, no dealing with insurance back and forth. Your settlement check could arrive in 30 days or less. And here's what makes this risk-free. You pay absolutely nothing unless you actually get compensated. Nobody can reverse what happened to you. But this program makes certain you receive every dollar you're owed for medical expenses, missed work, vehicle repairs, and everything else without putting your life on hold for a lawsuit. What would $80,000, $120,000, or even $150,000 do for you today? Clear out those medical bills that keep growing. Get a reliable vehicle again. Stop living with constant financial anxiety and actually start recovering. That money is yours for the claim. Here's the reality about lawsuits. They sound like the right thing to do, but they're usually just the most painful way to get compensated. While you're stuck in court proceedings for months, dealing with continuances and legal fees, other people are already spending their settlement money and moving forward. And here's what insurance companies won't tell you. They actually want you to sue because it drags everything out and costs you money. The longer the process takes, the more likely you are to give up or step left just to make it responsible for this? If your accident happened anytime within the last 12 months and wasn't your fault, there's a strong chance you could qualify for major compensation. But these claims come with deadlines. Miss your window and that money disappears permanently. Click the link around this video, answer 4 quick questions, and discover if you could be owed a way bigger check. It's fast, it's free, and remember, you don't pay anything unless you win. But act now, because if you wait too long, you might be walking away from life-changing money.
Today, it is solid rock, but it was once hot, molten magma from deep underground. Only one force of nature has the awesome power and 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit heat to melt rock into magma and fire it to the surface. Volcanoes. The seas here didn't just drain away. They were pushed back by these mountains of fire. It was only in the 1960s, with the realization that Earth's continents were drifting around the planet, that scientists figured out why the volcanoes erupted under Death Valley. The theory of plate tectonics revealed that around 100 million years ago, an ancient oceanic plate began sinking under North America, pushing up the land. Heat from the collision powered a coastal chain of volcanoes, erupting on the land and finally driving away the sea, submerging Death Valley. This landscape would have been very explosive, hostile, steady, and that then set the stage for what was to become Death Valley. Still surviving in the valley to this day is the ghost town evidence of another substance, far rarer than granite, that the volcanoes brought to the surface. Gold. Although gold occurs naturally in more than 30 different U.S. states, the gold in Death Valley was concentrated in veins in the rock as magma solidified near the surface. It made it worth mining, and millions of years after its formation, it sparked the Death Valley Gold Rush.
A wonderful example of gold mines you have the Eureka mine, highest in the Panamint Mountains, associated with fine gold, granites were treated into these rocks 100 to 200 million years ago. The gold would have been in veins previously injected up into these rocks, and the gold would have been concentrated in these veins.
The gold rush here lasted just a few years. Miners often had to remove a ton of rock to recover only 1/10 of an ounce of gold, enough to produce just a single wedding ring. Today, all that remains are empty tunnels and ghost towns. Interesting to consider is the frenzy of activity, mining gold, exactly as the direct result of the kind of volcanic activity under the 200 million years. Geologists investigating the battle that raged in Death Valley between fiery volcanoes and ancient seas have found important evidence. Stromatolite fossils of proof that Death Valley was once submerged by the waters of a shallow sea. Veins of granite could only have formed in the fiery heat of the volcanoes that burst to the surface around 100 million years ago and drove that sea away. The volcanoes built up the land that was to become Death Valley into peaks as high as the Cascades mountain range. But deep beneath the Earth's surface, awesome geological forces were about to destroy those peaks, stretch the land apart, transform the mountains of Death Valley into the lowest point in the U.S. For a billion years, Death Valley remained a flat plain under the city. Around 100 million years ago, erupting volcanoes formed high mountain ranges. But then, the real geological mystery began. The land here must have undergone an extraordinary transformation. Because today, in Death Valley, those high mountain ranges have vanished. Incredibly, the one-time mountains have sunk below sea level to become the lowest point in North America. Yet all around the valley, snow-capped peaks still soar up to 11,000 feet into the air. The investigation digs deep under the landscape to discover what vast geological forces could have caused that huge difference in height between two places, just 20 miles away from each other.
There are a lot of mysterious aspects of Northwest Valley. It's a unique landscape because the valley floor itself is very deep, it's below sea level, and the mountains rise up very steeply on either side.
Clues to the power of these underground forces lie all over the valley, if you know where to look.
Here's to the go-getters. And not just the ones in the city, but everywhere. The birthday party club. The midnight marathon. The hikers, and open micers. With 30 grand proteins and tons of delicious flavors. Their protein isn't just for those who get after fitness. It's for those who get after life. Premier protein. Go get 'em.
Many of the rock layers were originally deposited on the ancient flat seabed. They can still be seen as horizontal layers. But other nearby layers aren't horizontal at all. They tilt downwards into the ground. Miller finds a further clue of Earth's power in the unusual shape of this cinder cone, a mound of ash and debris lying on Death Valley's floor.
It looks like a two-cinder cone, but in fact it's really just one that's been spread apart along a big fault zone. This has moved from 700 feet in some 700,000 years to that's about a foot per 1,000 years, which sounds like it's really, really slow, but if you look at it over a great length of geological time, you get quite a lot of slips. And give it even longer time, you'll be offset even more.
Miller's next challenge is explaining what is making the fault line move. For that, she studies other ancient rock formations whose jagged outline has given them the name turtlebacks.
The turtlebacks are crucial for understanding Death Valley's early origins. They have so much of the record here if you're willing to spend time to try to unravel it.
The real clue lies in the rock's distinctive texture.
If you just take a look at this rock closely, you can see that it's very kind of strung out, very stringy. It tends to be pretty fine grained.
This texture tells Miller where these rocks came from.
You see evidence that these rocks were deformed, just like if you take a piece of plastic and then you heat it up, you can bend it. This is the same thing with rock. And so these rocks formed at high temperatures and pressure within the Earth's crust at depths of about 10 miles or so. And they've since been brought to the Earth's surface.
Miller concluded that some overwhelming underground force must have raised the turtleback rocks to the surface and stretched them out like warm coffee as Death Valley formed. The final explanation of what happened here, once again, came back to the way continents drift around the globe. As the collision of the plates that had forced ancient volcanoes to the surface slowed down and peaked, the high mountains that once dominated the land were slowly pulled apart and tilted downwards. Gradually, the underlying crust grew thinner and thinner. A deep basin formed between the mountain ranges. Valley is the most extreme example of what such stretching forces can do. By measuring seismic waves, scientists discovered that here, the continental crust is just 16 miles thick. This might sound like a lot, but it is far thinner than almost anywhere else on the planet. Around the globe, the Earth's continental crust averages 25 miles thick. It's strongest beneath the Himalayas, at 43 miles, thick enough to support the weight of massive mountains such as Everest. The Turtleback Rocks also offer Miller evidence as to when Death Valley's stretching started. Dating these rocks reveals that the deformation started here around 13 million years ago, although Death Valley did not take on its final shape immediately.
Death Valley is really good. When you look at the history of
You know?
modern Death Valley, is
Okay.
3 or 4 million years old. The stretching started before that.
And don't get too mesmerized by it.
Scientists know that the process is far from finished. They've found irrefutable evidence in the alien Death Valley landscape known as Badwater Basin.
Well, he just put that on there because he ain't got that damn material for the
Western Hemisphere,
molding thing.
282 feet below sea level. We're actually standing below sea level about the depth of.
Yeah.
This floor has been sinking about a tenth of an inch per year, which is about
Yeah, but
half
don't put nothing on there against it for a while until it's hard.
Spencer was looking for a new pitch person. I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring. I do have the experience. I got tucked into a Kinesis mattress, and now I wake up every morning bringing life force energy to myself.
No ticket and paid $1,000 on Kinesis. You know, I think we found the pitch perfect person.
Friend, I am going to get to the line though. The bed store. We've been touching on that.
Now that's life force energy.
Well, we'll soon find out.
Continual stretching of the Earth's crust has turned Badwater into one of the lowest spots on any continent on the planet.
Yeah, hopefully.
Its true depth is even lower still.
Yeah, at least we know they ain't got no damn teenagers or something that's gonna fall asleep in the goddamn tub.
We can go down through sediment that represents
Hopefully.
ancient periods of time. Death Valley is open within that 3 miles.
You would need to drill down through the sediment to a depth equivalent to 11 Empire State Buildings end to end before you hit the crustal bedrock. The total volume of material in this basin would bury New York to the depth of nearly a mile. The valley floor is constantly being covered with sediment.
That's a horse of a different color.
But it can never fill up completely.
Sediment is coming in at a rate that is less than
Basically doing the pee-pee dance.
Death Valley itself, so that we're always maintaining a surface here on the valley that is sitting below sea level and is continuing to sink through time.
This constant movement shows Earth's geological forces at their
Yeah.
most dynamic and makes Death Valley unique.
The allure is that nowhere on Earth do we see continental crust being pulled apart at this
Yeah.
rate or this magnitude.
The investigation into Death Valley's creation has established how it sank to become the lowest point in North America. The Turtleback Rocks were deformed by the powerful tectonic forces pulling the mountains apart to form a wide valley floor. The still sinking landscape of Badwater, currently 282 feet below sea level, is proof that the crust here is still being stretched today. But the sinking of Death Valley is just one part of the story. Geologists still need to investigate how one of the hottest places on Earth was shaped by the power of moving iron.
It's in there, in the bucket on the floor.
1.2 billion years ago,
No,
Death
bed.
Valley was submerged by ancient beings. Around 1 billion years later, volcanic
I think I
rock
see you
drove
that's
the
why.
things away. 13 million years ago, the continental crust started stretching apart here. And by 3 million years ago, Death Valley was one of the lowest points on Earth. The clue that showed investigators what happens next was the discovery in the valley of a little-known but highly valued white crystalline rock.
When one thinks of prospectors in the Death Valley region, one often thinks of hunting for gold and for silver. But there was one mineral that was much less glamorous, much less sexy and exciting, and that's borax. But it was actually known as the white gold of the desert.
In 1880, borax was a rare but in-demand mineral used in antiseptics and detergents. One impoverished couple desperately trying to make a living in Death Valley was Aaron and Rosie Winters. They heard from a passing prospector that they could make good money from borax if they could find it. They learned from their fellow prospectors the then secret method of testing rock for borax. Anxious to potential profits for themselves, the couple waited until the dead of night
Yeah,
to
but there
perform
was
the
a
test
space
in
there. I
Death
don't know
Valley.
if that space is.
You burn the mineral to see if the powder that we have in front of us here contains any borax. Now what Winters did is to add sulfuric acid to borax-bearing mineral. We'll add some alcohol. The Winters, I used cheap whiskey back in 1880. And the flame should burn, hopefully a green color, if borax is there. And as we can see, the flame is green in color. And in 1880, the Winters knew that they would become wealthy because they had borax.
From these humble beginnings, a whole industry grew in Death Valley. It made the Winters' fortune and also gave scientists a priceless clue in their quest to understand the geological history of Death Valley. Because borax deposits like these can only be found in the beds of ancient freshwater lakes.
Your brain health matters. And when things really matter, you take care of them. Are you doing the same for your brain? Being proactive about brain health may help reduce the risk of dementia from conditions like Alzheimer's disease. Make brain health a priority. Ask your doctor about your risk factors and for a cognitive assessment. Learn more at brainhealthmatters.com. Subway's new sub of the day gets you a different tasting sub every day, and they're all $4.99. On Monday, $4.99. Tuesday, also $4.99. It doesn't carry out your rate for $4.99 for Thursday. Find your new favorite sub of the day at Subway.
The seawater that once covered this valley had long gone, 1 billion or more years earlier. But the presence of borax proves that fresh water must have flooded into the area when Ice Age glaciers started to melt from the surrounding mountains around 200,000 years ago. As the glaciers melted, rivers flowed towards the lowest point, Death Valley. Gradually, a vast lake spread out across the flooded valley floor. The valley's catchment area was huge. Its rivers drained more than 9,000 square miles, an area bigger than New Hampshire. The water pouring in from the surrounding mountains leached minerals such as borax from the rock and deposited them on the lake bed.
In a lot of the lake beds, this mineral borax would appear as kind of a white fuzzy mineral. It's actually called cotton ball.
The borax proved that a lake existed here. Geologists called it Lake Manly, after one of the pioneers, William L. Manly, who had named Death Valley in 1849. But they had no evidence to tell them solution to this puzzle is revealed in this small hill with a road cut straight through it, near the valley's edge, at a spot called Speedy Junction.
It's very fortunate to have a road cut right through this gravel deposit. So in the exposure, we can see very well-rounded pebbles. We can also see some crude layering in the gravel, and they're stacked in against each other, and we call that shingling.
The shape and the smoothness of the stone tell Caskey exactly how these pebbles got here.
The way they're stacked tells us that the direction of water flow that laid these pebbles down like this was from right to the left. So we know that this had to be wave action. That's strong evidence that this is a beach environment.
By looking at the height of this pebble beach above the valley floor, Caskey calculates the dimensions of the lake.
From this steep gravel bog that we're standing on, the waves would have been crashing at our feet. And as we look south, it's hard to imagine a lake sitting out there across that vast salt pan. But Lake Manly would have covered about 600 square miles, and it would have been about 450 feet deep. This odd napping shoreline on a really hot day in Death Valley, you kind of long for the ancient days of yore when there were big lakes out here. You can imagine this was a beautiful place, full of lush vegetation. Yeah, it's quite a different place than it is today.
For Caskey, the next step is discovering why Death Valley no longer has a lake. And there is evidence about that in one of its most unusual landscapes, this twisted, jagged field of white peat that's called the Devil's Golf Course. Even the sounds here are mysterious. In the silence of the desert, there is a faint popping noise. The relentless sun sucks every drop of moisture out of the parched surface.
The salt that we see here is the remains of an ancient lake. It's called Devil's Golf Course because it's probably the least likely surface that you would ever want to play golf on.
The surface is made up of rough salt crystals, popping when they expand and contract in the searing heat. But this salt did not come from the sea. Just like the borax, the salt was leached from the rocks when fresh water started flowing into Death Valley 200,000 years ago. The salt was originally dissolved in the freshwater Lake Manly, and Caskey has a simple experiment to show exactly how it ended up on the floor of Death Valley.
I'll pour the water and salt solution into this pan, and as the water evaporates, you should see salt forming, and that's exactly how the salt has formed. Hot enough out here today to evaporate pretty quickly. In a fairly short amount of time, beautiful salt crystals formed along the edges. So that's essentially how a salt pan forms. When rainwater comes in, salt goes into solution, basically just like the water that we have in this water bottle. And from the moment the water starts evaporating, salt crystals start forming.
Today, Death Valley's salt pans cover more than 200 square miles, an area 3 times the size of Washington, D.C. They are the remnants of the ancient lake that finally disappeared 2,000 years ago when Earth's climate began to warm up.
Changing honeysuckle. You feel like a lot.
You okay?
It's different, but you'll love it.
Like how it's smaller to cut overhead costs.
That's going to take some money. Differences that save you money. It's an only thing. Because sometimes we feel bad. Even when it's for their own good. Give more love than humanly possible when you feed a Hill's scientifically proven formula. Because you're only human. It's Hill's.
From then on, Death Valley's temperatures just kept on rising.
Well, Death Valley is definitely one of the hottest spots in the world. The record high was 134 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded back in July 10th, 1913. Just to give you perspective on that, the caretakers of was the one doing the reporting back then. He described that day as being so hot, he saw the swallows falling dead in flight.
Geologists today understand how Death Valley's unusual geology is responsible for the punishing climate that killed off its lake. It stays so dry because there are three distinct mountain ranges between Death Valley and the moisture carried off of the Pacific Ocean, over 200 miles away.
So we have the Sierra Nevada to the west of it. The storms come in from the west, laden with moisture. They rise up. They lose most of that moisture on the west side. And each set of mountains whips a little more moisture out of the clouds. And here, with our three sets of mountains in between us and the ocean, by the time that moisture gets to Death Valley, there's either all gone or we just get a few drops of rain.
Almost all storms from the coast are stopped by the three mountain ranges, each one in turn having an effect the scientists call a rain shadow.
So we are in the rain shadow of a rain shadow of a rain shadow, an average less than 2 inches a year.
And there is another way that geology influences the desert climate. Air heated under the cloudless sky is trapped by the surrounding mountains. In summer, Death Valley becomes a deadly dangerous furnace. The local weather station provides a graphic demonstration of how quickly that heat could have destroyed Death Valley's lake. Every day, Callaghan checks the rate of evaporation.
For summer months, we may take 5 of these containers here, so I'm going to fill them up and dump them into the pond until it brings the water level up to the needle. Now, our average rainfall is barely 2 inches a year. The evaporation pond records up to 150 inches of evaporation.
That huge discrepancy between the amount of rainfall and the speed of evaporation means that a lake 12 feet deep and 30 miles long would evaporate in just a single year. Lake Manly was bigger than that, but over time, it never stood a chance. The scientists' studies of Death Valley have solved the mysteries of its freshwater past. Borax, discovered here in the 1880s, proves that Death Valley was once filled with a freshwater lake. Pebbles unearthed on an ancient shoreline show the lake once covered 600 square miles, an area 3 times the size of Chicago. When the last freshwater pools dried up here 2,000 years ago, Death Valley started its reign as the driest place in the U.S., which makes it ironic that the investigation's next phase, examining the valley's most recent geological upheavals, involved scientists studying the awesome power of fast-flowing water. Around 100 million years ago, Death Valley's ancient seas gave way to exploding volcanoes, whose peaks were then wrenched apart to create the lowest spot in America. From around 200,000 years ago, the valley filled with a freshwater lake, but the rain shadow surrounding mountains dried up the water. For the past 2,000 years, Death Valley has been hotter and drier than anywhere else in North America, which makes it all the more mysterious to find Mosaic Canyon, a deep chasm seemingly cut by water in this parched and arid land. Especially when there is evidence of massive boulders having been pushed around like pebbles.
Look at the size of that boulder. Look at how high above our feet it is. It's about 3 feet in diameter, and I can't even estimate the weight of that thing.
She may be in a desert, but Messina knows there is only one force that could have lifted the boulder up so high.
Prodigy. They must have. The force of the water that came through here had to have been pretty severe when you get that boulder up there plastering against the wall. This boulder gives us evidence about the force of the water that comes down these canyons during flash floods.
A flash flood is one of nature's most lethal weapons.
If there were a flash flood coming down this canyon, I wouldn't have enough time to run out of its path because the water flows down at an incredible velocity. Flash floods are among the most violent processes on the earth. They can carry material the size of an SUV without any problem at all.
In one of the driest places in the world, the floodwater comes from a surprising source: rain. On average, Death Valley receives just 2 inches of rain a year. This is less than half the rain that falls on New York in a single month. But violent summer storms mean it can all fall in just a single day. The floods transform the desert landscape in a number of ways. One is known as the desert bloom, where seeds and plants that may have lain dormant for up to 10 years burst into flower after a sudden rainfall. This phenomenon might be beautiful, but there is another deadlier side to these floods, with a human cost.
In 2004, there was a flash flood that came down Front Street. It was this muddy slurry that was dense enough to pick up a vehicle and carry it downhill, and several people died in it. The 2004 flash flood is small in comparison to some of the events that we see preserved here in the Rock.
Flash floods happen all over the world, but there's evidence here of their particular and rare geological effects in Death Valley.
Marble is very highly polished. Cracked, gouged. It's been polished by very fine grain material that comes down as part of flash flood. And it's really smooth and it's fluted. It's really unique.
To uncover how these unusual polished walls were formed, Messina takes a closer look at what geologists term the Badlands.
I think it's called bad because nothing will grow on it. There's just this very loose material out here, and it erodes so readily that plants can't even take root. So this is Badlands.
The rock that makes up the Badlands is the dried-up remains of the 2,000-year-old lake bed that once submerged Death Valley.
This is nothing more than just a fluid rock. It's called mudstone because it's slightly liquefied, meaning it's turned into rock.
The mudstone's minerals are arranged in tightly packed flat sheets.
The rain can't penetrate the mudstone. And therefore, the rain picks up some water particles and carries them downhill.
These particles are the key to the canyon's smooth, polished walls.
It flows through here, so laden with sediment that it causes a lot of polishing and incision. So every time a flash flood comes through, this canyon gets deeper, the walls get higher, and the rock gets more polished.
The sediment-laden floods can carve into Death Valley's rocks with tremendous speed and force. These canyons have been gouged out, where the rock here has been fractured and weakened by the continuous stretching the valley is undergoing.
This is upfront, in-your-face geology happening right here. Death Valley is dynamic. This is a place where things are happening in a human lifespan.
In this arid desert, The investigation has identified water as the latest factor in Death Valley's continuing geological evolution. The giant boulders plastered high on the canyon walls illustrate the power of flash flooding in the desert. The smooth walls of Mosaic Canyon show how the dried mud from an ancient lake still affects how Death Valley is being shaped to this day. And yet, some mysteries remain unsolved, including one of the world's most intriguing geological rivers, the rocks that seem to walk by themselves, moving thousands of feet across the floor of Death Valley. Over 1.2 billion years, Death Valley has been transformed from a watery landscape to a barren desert.
Two Italian trio protein pockets are doubling with pepperoni, lime, ham, provolone, lettuce, tomato, and garlic aioli with 23 grams of protein. The prices are shocking. Prepare yourself, okay? Just $3.99. Subway protein box. Eat fresh, feel good.
But even though geologists now understand the processes that have shaped this extraordinary region, there are still mysteries to be solved.
If you choose to write a 3D to tell, if you choose to write a connected successfully,
The Mile Wide is the setting for one of Death Valley's most intriguing geological puzzles. Its sliding stones.
although this place is odd, after coming here 100 more times, and every time there'll be something different, something I didn't see.
Stretching behind these rocks are long, grooved trails in the earth. It is clear that they are tracks left behind as the rocks move across the valley floor. The puzzle is to work out how the rocks can slide uphill against this slightly tilted surface. These are no mere pebbles. Some of these rocks are over 700 pounds. And some of the trails are nearly 3,000 feet long. The phenomenon was first recorded here by scientists some 100 years ago. And yet, in this remote location, no one has ever seen the rocks moving. Messina has been tracking the movement of each individual rock on the racetrack since 1996. Her GPS readings are accurate to within a single inch.
Geology is really nothing more than detective. And rather than looking for evidence of things that took place a long time ago, what I really like about working on the racetrack is we're looking at things that are happening right now. It's an ongoing process.
Her first clue is the surface on which the rocks slide.
I try to move my hand over it. I could probably file my nails. However, after it rains, there's so much clay in the lake bed sediment that it gets slick. It's almost like Teflon. You wouldn't need very much force to set even a very large rock into motion, just because the friction on the surface is almost nil.
But water alone isn't enough to make these rocks move. Messina has identified a second factor at work.
You can have rain, but if you don't have wind, a couple of days later, I don't think these rocks are going anywhere.
The racetrack is a natural wind tunnel. The wind funnels into the valley from the south. Close to the ground, the winds can exceed hurricane strength, reaching speeds of over 90 miles per hour, enough to push the rocks into action.
If you have wind and there is no friction, all you need to do is hit a rock with your finger like that, and it would go into motion.
When all these elements are in place, the rocks can begin their mysterious journey.
If no one has ever seen the rocks in motion, we can only guess how fast they go. But based on some of the evidence that I've seen, these rocks aren't inching along by any means. And the best estimate we have is about 3 to 4 miles an hour. So a nice brisk walk.
But until this phenomenon is witnessed, the mystery of Death Valley's sliding rocks will remain.
I hope that this mystery isn't solved. It's what keeps me interested, and I think it's what keeps a lot of people interested.
Geologists studying Death Valley have figured out its extraordinary geological evolution. Stromatolite fossils show that this area was once covered by seawater. Turtleback rocks prove that the land was stretched apart by tectonic forces, dropping the valley floor down to the lowest point in America. Pebbles at Beatty Junction prove that Death Valley was once covered with a freshwater lake. And the smooth, polished walls of Mosaic Canyon show that water is still at the heart of Death Valley's modern evolution. Death Valley remains one of the most extreme geological wonders on Earth, and it's still evolving. The valley floor is being constantly pushed apart by forces deep within the Earth. This means that the crust will continue to stretch and thin. One day, tens of millions of years into the future, Death Valley could be separated by the sea from the rest of the U.S.
Anti-ice protesters took over a church in Minneapolis. Americans leaned on ice captains, fleeing through in kayak, and to get into the latest Iran and Greenland, nucleus in Canada, and kind of a lot going on in the world for decades. Lessons in fishing again at the Navy stories to each everything by that. Characters of each inspired as we check the box. You can also something change, and you knew what they were doing. And you may not realize that the same thing can happen in the next year. Just like Hollywood, what pilot history of us in the film, and you just as you. The news Daily Wire Plus 2, real history is now all is a reset. American history, that is anti-American. Watch the season 1 year, the real history of slavery. Streams right now on Daily Wire Plus. If there's one key to American politics, that key rule is this: Americans do not like ugly conspiracies. There's a lot of Americans that live here, as long as they don't have to look at it. If you push TV, bad things are happening all over the world, not constantly. In the United States, there's 340 million people. Bad things are happening. When bad things happen to our TV, you just see those people clean out there. And that's what it's happening. It's happening to be amazing. Yeah. Who gets blamed for those ugly decisions on TV becoming in fact, it is not typically good for the elevation of industry when those issues are raised under the physical effect. So, if there are lots of people crossing the border on ugly pictures on our TV, dividing the president, it's not going to advance the benefit. If there are a lot of ugly pictures on the TV of ice ages and concentrations, today, Death Valley continues to sink at a steady rate of 1/10 of an inch a year, while its surface continues to be sculpted by water, living proof that the earth is never at rest. Earth, a unique structure, restless and dynamic. Shift and crash. Glaciers grow and recede. Geological history behind. This episode investigates the deadliest and most destructive volcanic event in U.S. history. Mount St. Helens, a pristine snow-capped mountain suddenly blew 600 feet off the summit in a type of eruption no one had ever witnessed before. Scientists
Trying to understand what made this event so lethal, uncover evidence for one of the biggest landslides in history. A sideways directed blast that knocked over 230 square miles of forest and mega mudflows that thundered down the valley and destroyed everything in their path. What scientists have discovered from this unique event brings geologists one step closer to understanding how the Earth was made. In Washington State, 100 miles south of Seattle, stands Mount St. Helens, one of 20 major volcanoes that form part of the Cascade Mountain range at the North American West Coast. Before May 18, 1980, he was at the center of a thriving recreational paradise across the timber. The volcano had a beautiful conical form. It was called the Mount Fuji of North America, and the form was just concave. But beneath its beauty lay an ominous secret. The mountain was brewing something that had a deadly potential. The story began on March 20, 1980, when a 4.2 magnitude earthquake woke Mount St. Helens from a slumber that had lasted 123 years. Wake up, sit that down. The first thing is prescription medicine includes vitamin D, breakfast and vitamin OSA, the self-predicting food. A breakthrough treatment that can work and reduce breathing the rest of the food. After taking step down for just 1 year, many people had no OSA symptoms. Don't take it away from you. Or if you or someone in your family had medullary thyroid cancer or multiple endocrine neoplasms and anti-2, tell your doctor to get a lump of stone in the neck. Stop step down and call your doctor if your stomach has more serious allergic reactions. Severe side effects, including headache, pancreas, or gallbladder problems. Tell your doctor if you're full baby surgery, depression or suicidal thoughts, before scheduled procedures for anesthesia, if you're nursing, pregnant, only to be, or taking birth control. Taking step down with a funnel, urea, or insulin may cause no blood sugar. Side effects include nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting. It cause dehydration and worsen kidney problems. Wake up, sit that down. Talk to your doctor and visit stepdown.com. The future of enterprise computing depends on intelligence, resilience, and disciplined infrastructure. We are hyperscale data and AI data center companies anchored by Bitcoin. We deploy high-performance GPU compute to support advanced AI, machine learning, and enterprise workloads, delivering efficiency, reliability, and flexibility across our platform. By modernizing a legacy industrial transform existing infrastructure into an efficient generation compute environment. Our parallel compute model allows AI systems and digital asset infrastructure to operate side by side, maximizing utilization while maintaining operational control. Bitcoin strengthens our balance sheet by design. Through disciplined execution, our digital asset treasury provides liquidity, resilience, and long-term strategic flexibility. Responsible operations matter. Hyperscale data is publicly traded on NYSE American under the ticker symbol ECUS, providing transparency, accountability, and access to public capital markets. With secure infrastructure, strong liquidity, and plans to expand compute capacity, we enter 2026 positioned for responsible growth. Hyperscale data, AI powered, Bitcoin backed, enterprise ready. The last known eruption was witnessed in 1857 by local tribes. In 1980, the earthquake was an alarming sign because earthquakes may be an indication that an eruption is building up. Earthquakes can happen when magma rises deep inside the earth, shifting and breaking the rock on its journey up. The very first signal we had was earthquake.
Alabama volcano. And within a matter of just a few days, it was clear that this something unique. So the word went out to science, and very quickly we started to converge it and started trying to understand what was going on. And what we saw was the volcano was becoming more and more active.
Volcanoes are dangerous because they are hard to predict. In 1980, the science of predicting volcanic eruptions was still in its infancy. The most recent explosive eruption that occurred on the continental USA was Lawson Peak in California in 1915. Since then, most of the experience volcanologists have gained came from studying quiet lava flows in Hawaii.
Volcanoes are incredibly complicated and they're always surprising. No one surprises us all the time. What we're learning.
Armed with the latest scientific equipment, volcanologists were anxious to study a possible eruption. Little did they know that they were about to witness the most deadly volcanic blast in the U.S. in living memory. On Coldwater Ridge, 6 miles northeast of the volcano, they installed a trailer with highly sophisticated equipment and began to closely monitor the mountain. From there, they had a perfect view over the volcano.
We had a front row seat to seeing the evolution and reawakening of a major cascade volcano. And we were fortunate in that we had people here with a lot of energy. People were working 15, 20 hours a day.
In addition to earthquakes, another key indicator for volcanic activity is gas emission. Magma made out of hot molten rock contains gas that comes from deep inside the earth, 30 miles down. As magma moves up from these gases, there is less rock weighing down from above, so the pressure on the magma increases. Gases dissolved in the magma and stick and rise to the surface. But gases are not just a telltale sign of rising magma. They are also responsible for the explosion of the eruption. The greater the buildup of gas pressure within the volcano, the more explosive the eruption will be.
Well, this is all right. You ready?
Here we go. I learned about it.
Let's demonstrate the importance of gas pressure in a magma. The bottle is partially filled. This is filled about 80% with water. This will be stimulating a volcanic eruption. I'm going to carefully place the bottle here. We'll tilt it a little bit away from it. I'm going to put on my safety goggles. And now I'm about ready to start pumping. Here we go. Oh, there's a little bit of gas coming at the bottom. A little bit more. And the pressure is up to about 60 pounds per square inch. Whoa! Here we get it! We got it! Yay!
Like in the bottle, the presence of gas at the surface of a volcano is a sure sign that an explosive eruption is building. In spring 1980, the Shadowball's job was to detect these gases. The gas he was looking for was sulfur dioxide. It's a gas that smells like rotten eggs and is associated with volcanic activity. But the key to the measurement wasn't the smell. The secret was subtle differences in the color of the light.
The instrument looks at the light in the sky, and it looks for the presence of certain molecules like sulfur dioxide, which also absorb light from the sky. And it measures the difference between the light absorbed by sulfur dioxide and the light available in the rest of the sky.
In March and April 1980, the Shadowball and his team were using this instrument to detect the amount of escaping gas. They assumed that the gas levels would increase prior to the eruption, as more and more magma would rise inside the volcano. But in 1980, the assumption proved wrong. Gas emissions didn't change even though earthquakes were getting stronger and hundreds of small tremors were recorded.
There was really no significant variation. It was a very low level of sulfur dioxide emission. And there was nothing in those emission rates that really indicated that an eruption was just around the corner.
But by late April, after 5 weeks of tremors, the mountain gave them another clue to what was brewing inside. On the north face, a huge foam was growing out.
A casual observer would look at the volcano and say, well, it's no longer a nice Fuji-type shape. But in fact, the north side now is bulged out, and it was obviously deformed in some way. And we were trying to understand what could have been causing that deformation.
It was the first time scientists were able to monitor the deformation of a mountain. On Coldwater Ridge, they installed an instrument that uses laser technology to get precise measurements as to how fast the bulge was growing.
What we were trying to do was to focus a laser beam from this instrument on a reflector in the volcano, receive the return reflected signal, and then measure that distance.
The reflectors they used were small mirrors about 3 inches across that were fixed on the bulge.
That was the case